Okay, so we would now, what we're going to do now is ask, everyone's going to have an opportunity to ask questions. I know some of us have a lot of questions. What we're going to do is each person will ask a question, and then we'll just keep going until everyone's questions have been asked. If someone asks your question, great, you don't need to ask it. So would anybody like to start? Anybody want to be the first one? Director Gonzalez. And student directors, decide if you want to go next or at the very end.
So starting with questions, I want to know more about moving custodial and buildings and grounds positions to the routine and restricted maintenance. I forget what RMA stands for. But so I have a couple questions. One is, I'm worried that if we move positions into that fund, that when something important needs to happen, like replacing a roof or replacing lead pipes, for example, that we're not going to have the funds available to do that. I also know that there's some planned reductions in custodial, and I'm really concerned about that because I hear from my high schools all the time that they're already poorly maintained. And so I don't, especially bathrooms is what I hear a lot of complaints about. And so I'm really worried about that. And then I had a conversation with our state trustee yesterday. It was really helpful because we're hearing a lot of comments from members of the community. Why can't we use one-time dollars to avoid as many layoffs as we can? And so I had a conversation with him about the use of one-year contracts and whether we could expand our use of one-year contracts. He said that it's fine as long as everybody's clear, both the employee and the district, that this is a fixed-term contract and that people are being noticed appropriately at the end of the term of that contract. And so I really want to understand what positions do we have that could be converted to one-year contracts so that we could avoid as many layoffs as possible. And how could the use of one-year contracts help us to mitigate the budget reductions that have to be done?
Those sounded like a few questions. Director Gonzalez, we're trying to do one at a time, one topic at a time.
Okay. Can you start with the one-year contracts?
So we're going to, that's fine. We'll start with that one. But we want you to ask one topic at a time. Thank you for giving us the example to clarify. One question, and then we're just going to keep going. So you may have multiple questions. We'll keep going until you've been able to ask each question, but we want each person to have a turn to ask the topic.
Okay,
Topic is one-year contracts.
is the first one you want to
Yeah.
cover. So so I'm going to cover sort of just holistically the idea of using one-time dollars, and then I will ask for assistance on the one-year contract. So on the idea of using one-time dollars, right? It is so long as we're using one-time dollars on one-time expenses, right? And so what Chris would have described is actually something that some school districts did during the Great Recession. So when the times were the worst across the country, even globally, right, when we were in that Great Recession. So it wasn't specific like this, where we've got multiple school districts in the state feeling the impact. But in that situation, it wasn't uncommon for school districts to be able to do things like have their foundations raise specific dollar amounts. So I'm going to give you one specific real example. We had a foundation at my last school district that chose to fund technology specialists. And so they raised dollars specifically for that purpose, and they funded a certain FTE level. And we all understood, including the technology specialists, that they were being funded for 1 year and 1 year only. And every year they were going to get that layoff notice. And then every year the foundation was going to, again, try to fund those positions until we could actually take on that cost as a school district. I will tell you, just in that experience, it was really hard on that employee. And the way we could make it work for the foundation was by having them raise those dollars and having the check to us and cleared before February. So before February, they had to have those dollars to us so that we knew that we didn't have to lay off any employee. And so long as that timetable was met, we were able to use one-time dollars for those one-time employee contracts.
Okay. What I've observed the last couple years, and the public is constantly commenting on this as well, is that as our financial systems and have improved, we are seeing growth in the ending fund balance, even on the restricted side, on the on the unrestricted side, because I understand why we have the restricted fund balances, Measure N and Measure G, and we're accumulating there for future years. But even on the unrestricted side, because our systems have gotten better, our position control has gotten better, we are seeing increases on the unrestricted side. And I am as concerned as you are about the historical poor practices, financial practices that we've had, and do not want to see us engage in that process again. I also don't want to see us lay off people and disrupt schools if there is a possibility that we will have a sustained funding source going forward, which is possible. We obviously don't know what's going to happen in the election in November, but if we can use that one-year contracts to get us through 1 year, and if we don't win, an increased revenue source from the state, then we will have the option to terminate the one-year contracts that we've created, but it could help us prevent a lot of disruption.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. So just to remind everyone of the process we're going to use, everybody is going to have an opportunity to ask a question. We'll keep going. Then we're going to come back and we're going to say, these are the things that I can live with. Given where we are, I can live with them. And then we can talk about suggestions that we have and how that works in the trade-off. So thank you for that, for being the guinea pig. Student directors, would you like to go next, or would you rather wait till the end? Okay, so Director Torres, we're going to go to you next. And I did ask board members in advance if you wanted to bring your questions in writing. You can do that. If you want to share them with everyone so everyone sees what you're asking in writing, that's fine. Or not. It's up to you. But do, after the fact, please take note of the questions you're asking and be sure that you share them with staff so that staff can be sure they're addressing everything when they come back to us in 2 weeks, because that's when we're going to see what this is going to look like. So Director Torres, your turn. Thank you very much for your patience.
So I think for me, I'm looking at the comments that were made by the different groups. The unions asked about when do they get to have input, then the teachers, principals, and then central staff, and everybody is kind of asking the various questions, but ultimately with regard to, I think what kind of gets to all of it is cutting the schools directly means they have to do more with less, or schools, and I think my own principals, teachers will ask, how is it that central will serve us even better, but yet we're also cutting central? So in these questions, for instance, when will we really understand probably from staff, the way that these scrapes are going to be falling potentially, how does that drip down to schools, right? You're asking them to cut, you're cutting central, but then you're reorganizing. So is there anything that will look different in regard to services that schools receive from central? Or is it just going to be, there's going to be gaping holes, in other words? Because one of the questions that jumped out for me, for instance, central people said, you're doing these cross-department approach and making shifts and reductions, and then is this going to be timely enough so that the departments are ready for it with fewer staff? What is that going to trickle down like to schools? Because in the end, I'm always wanting to know who gets the bigger scrapes. If we're all going to take some scrapes and cuts and bruises, are we really talking about our students feeling it the worst, or the adults coming in and time is just of the essence to get their work done? There was something on the radio the other day that said people go to work and they get about 3.5 hours worth of work done. They spend time on email that's personal. They spend time going to get coffee, going to smoke, going to lunch, sitting around talking. And so I just kind of laughed because when I get to work, in 10 hours, I work 10 hours. I don't spend 3.5 hours working in.
So Director Torres, can you clarify the question?
How is this going to trickle down to schools if you even know? And if you don't, when are we going to get more depth of what those cuts are going to look like?
With the consolidations in particular,
Yes.
We have been thinking.
Can you make sure your microphone is on?
It is on.
Okay, thanks.
So I'll just closer to it. With the consolidations in particular, that has been one of the specific questions we've been asking ourselves is how will this benefit specifically benefits, so not just impact, but how can we make this benefit school sites? An observation I've made here is that we have principals who spend a lot of time on operations. And we don't want operational leaders, we want instructional leaders. And so in thinking through about those consolidations, that has been one of the goals, is how do we think about how we centralize some of these things that isn't the best use of that brain power and that skill set that our principals have, so that we can just do it centrally. And so we're very mindful of it, and we're thinking through those pieces to understand what are some of those tasks that we can take off of a principal's desk and bring it centrally.
Thank you. Director Ng.
Thank you. Thanks for providing the school level analysis in the board packet. That's something that was requested at the budget committee meeting, and I know it was a quick turnaround. Really appreciate that analysis. So my question is around the school site discretionary budget proposed cuts and the AP and clerical cuts, because it wasn't clear to me from either the school level analysis or the proposed changes how, sorry, I'm just trying to bring it up here, how those are going to be allocated, or there must have been some assumptions that were made that went into the total amounts that are, so how will that be distributed across the school sites? And then for the AP and clerical, and then on the discretionary side, it was a little confusing to me because sounds like two changes. There's the grade span change, and then there's also a reduction. So if you could just walk that through one more time, because I've heard it a couple of times, but I'm still a little confused about the bottom line. And when I look at the school level analysis, I see the 50%, but I'm not sure if it also, I'm not sure how to read it from the grade span adjustments that might also might also impact it.
Sure. So let me start with the grade span adjustment, just because that's the easiest one. The grade span adjustment really isn't tied to savings. I think if we implement that one, it's like a $7,000 difference in total allocation. So that's really not achieving anything. What it is achieving is a level of understanding that a TK student is a TK student, regardless of whether they're a TK student in an elementary school or a TK student in a TK to 6 school, I think we have. So what we've essentially, or TK to 8, I should have said. The way we've allocated dollars so far is not based on grade level, but instead based on the type of school. So if I'm a first grader in one type of school versus a first grader in another type of school, I'm generating different dollar amounts for my school. And what this does is say for a first grader, regardless of the type of school that they go to, they're going to be generating that same dollar amount that's going to follow them to their school site. With the reduction, it is a reduction, so it's a straight reduction of 50%. And in the piece that you have in front of you, what we've attempted to do is show you that piece by the actual dollar amount that they would be receiving next year with the reduction versus without the reduction, as well as providing some information on our titles to give you a sense of some of those other dollar amounts that they will be receiving, just to give you a sense of the entirety of the budget. You'll notice that it is not complete yet, right? So we've been working on some of those pieces, in particular with the question about the assistant principals and the clerical. We have about landed where we think we're about ready to share with folks. We do want to run it through principals first, and then we're about ready to share where we think we can make. And it's a two-pronged piece here that's happening, right? So one, it's a reduction. And then in that reduction, there's another shift of taking some of those existing assistant principals and shifting them into supplemental, right? So it is, I want to be really clear about that. If we have 10 assistant principals today, it means we're going to be reducing them to say from 10 to 8. And then the second piece of it is those 8 that are left, some of those will be charged to supplemental and concentration.
Okay, that was my other question. So it wouldn't be backfilling some of the,
The two.
Yeah,
There-
okay.
Yeah, it is a reduction
okay.
and then a redistribution of some
Okay.
of those.
So on the, just on the sheet, is the grade span adjustment reflected here? Because it says there are dashes there, so,
That's because the grade span adjustment, minimal changes. So I think on the grade span adjustment, you've got to go down to, I think, Greenleaf before you see an actual one. So on page 2 of that handout, Greenleaf site
I
112
see. Okay, so
is the
those are-
first time.
it's just a shift in how the budget's being allocated, but it's not, does not have a significant fiscal impact.
Right.
Okay, so the main impact will be on the 50% reduction of discretionary, which is reflected in the discretionary rate reduction.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
For that clarification.
Thank you, Director Ng. Director Yee. You'll have a chance to ask them all, hopefully, if we, well, no, we're going to try to limit this to an hour. So do ask the one you care about the most. Hopefully other people share yours.
Okay, I want to approach one thing that I saw in your presentation that I've never actually. I want to address something that I've never seen in any report to date, ever about the budget. And that is, since we have a per pupil allocation strategy, the more kids you have, the more budget you have. You make a case there, I think, that you want to optimize the number of kids to a school according, so that you fill up every class to its maximum in the school. That becomes a challenge with enrollment management and choice, because you're basically saying a populous, and we know that in the district, schools that have every seat full never worry about their budget. It's only schools that have 12, 13, 15 kids in a seat in their classrooms that are having this challenge. So that, to me, is the elephant in this whole discussion about defined autonomies, about budget allocations and discretionary cuts to the schools, because there's going to have to be a policy shift and a management of that particular event. And we're already rolling down that hill because we've had the choice, what do we call the process? The lottery, opportunity ticket, and all the rest of this is going to always is always going to prioritize or favor schools that are attractive schools and penalize schools that are unattractive. So is that what you were trying to address in this? And are we going to have that? That is the most difficult decision that I think we can make. But none of this kind of balancing works if we don't solve that problem in this coming year and the outgoing years.
Are you referencing specifically the item, the $400,000 item?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it only shows us 400,000, but it's millions that we're talking about in the allocation of site-based monies.
Research. Yes, so that item there is, it's a continuation of the work that the team has been working on already. So last year, the team thought through how do we do this at the secondary level and implemented those changes at the secondary level in the current year. And so for the next round, we're working on the elementary school piece. And just in principle, the idea just recognizes that kids do not come in nice, neat packages. And so this is our way of essentially trying to shape a nice, neat package. And so if we can have 24 kids in a classroom, we want 24 kids in a classroom. That 25th kid comes, we don't necessarily want to open a new school because now we have 2 really small classes and we don't have that guarantee of being able to fill in all those empty seats.
I'm looking at the other side of that, and that is the impulse, if I'm a principal, to take as many kids as I can to augment my budget at the expense of other schools. And I don't know that we've ever actually had that I have personally, in my years, have never had that conversation, face-to-face conversation, principal to principal, that says, you cannot take my kids. And you can't actually prevent that, because the parent can say, well, if I don't get Montclair, I'm going to Abia or Knox. And so, but if you don't solve that problem, I don't see how the allocation is going to actually be fair.
Okay. Well, point taken. We'll think about it and see if there.
I mean, do I have this as a significant problem, Ms. Aguilera, or not? And this is only one question.
Good evening, Sandra Aguilera, Chief Academic Officer for our district. So we do have these conversations with principals because there is that spirit to try to go out and attract more students to a particular school.
To fill
And
your
we do have to
classes.
have the conversation that we have to sustain our other schools. So we can't just draw from attract into one school by damaging the level of enrollment at other schools. So we do have this discussion during the projections conversation. And once those are set, we do expect for our Welcome Center to enroll to the projections. But it is a very difficult task because at the onset of the year, you have a huge influx of families coming into the Welcome Center, either looking for a new placement or perhaps new into our district. And so we are really trying to accommodate first and second choices. We do, when it comes to our 20-day count, often support school sites that lose a lot of students, so that way the education experience for students is not highly impacted. So at a school like Brookfield, Prescott, where they do tend to lose enrollment, we have been, instead of downsizing their staff to their actual enrollment, we have been supporting those schools to still have a decent education program.
Yeah.
But it is something that we do struggle with because for certain schools it is hard to maintain the level of students at that school site.
At one time in my history, that was called a balancing pool, and it had about $6 million shift in the budget. Is it at that level today?
No, it is not at that level. It has switched and changed into our appeals teachers
So how much would you say that costs?
for what I described. I say
Supplementing
we
schools which
probably
are-
do between 4 and 5 positions each year to sustain certain school sites, because if we were to take one teacher away from like a Brookfield, they could potentially have combination classes for every single class on the campus, and we just don't feel that that's a good education experience for all students. So we do sustain some school sites with staffing, even though their 20-day count, and according to contract, reflects that we could actually decline or decrease the number of staff at that school site.
Can you give some examples of sites this year?
So again, Brookfield, Prescott, Madison Park, Lower Campus. Those are the ones that come to mind, and they're consistently the same schools that we're supporting.
Right, and this is my last part on this, but with the pressure on the budgets at the school site, this is going, I mean, my prediction is only natural that people are going to try to enhance their own school budgets. And so the capping of the school at a certain size has to be something we all agree on, including the enrollment office. When somebody goes into the office, supposed to be going to Brookfield, wants to go to Joaquin Miller, what are we going to say? You can't go? So that's.
What is your second choice, perhaps, is the conversation that would happen with the families. And I know that the Welcome Center does do that a lot. They do often work with the school sites to see how, like, what's the impact of an additional student, but And in all cases, we can't say that we are able to accommodate a family's first choice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Director Hinton Hodge.
So I came, you're welcome. So I came into this, really, like, I don't have any questions, because I feel like there's this, the themes, for me is that we have a structural deficit, and we've had it for over a decade, and we, are not addressing the structural deficit. When you have schools like, Prescott, and before that it was Lafayette, in some ways it's a McClymonds. I wanted to bring up the amazing report that our staff did a couple of years ago. Is it Nana? That gave us a blueprint and gave us a sense of the numbers, the math around what we're doing. So I'm just exhausted of this kind of circular, empty process that we're doing. You hear people say cut from the top, and I know that it has a direct impact on everyone inside the organization, in particular young people. The acting CFO literally stood here tonight, and I do want to do an appreciation for folks doing like one-on-ones over the last week and a half around the budget, but literally sat here and suggested that we decentralize. That we need to look at differently results-based budgeting or budgeting that happens down at school sites. I mean, I could almost quote it. And I'm actually okay with that, but there's been no board direction around that. There's been no conversation. Our ideology and our rhetoric is that we want as much money to go down to school sites, and yet we don't necessarily do very good when it comes to, reallocation or what have you. So this feels like a bamboozle to me. This feels like we're not having like the very real conversations, one, around right-sizing the district, the number of schools that we have, and, it is so difficult for me to think about Prescott not getting what it needs, but it has 90 students. It has 90 students. And so the general fund is the only way that school will survive. So, so the idea that we're gonna argue about roses and concrete, that we'll close a school that actually has potentially some practice that we could actually merge with another school that has some other similar there is not that level of creativity. There is not that level of leaning in to figure out where it is that we can be leveraging around this. So this exercise to me is just, I'm tired of it. I'm not voting on it in any kind of way. I specifically asked from the state receiver, trustee guy, to other folks, they're always comparing us to other districts. We're not other districts. Hayward doesn't have 87 schools and 37,000 kids. So why do people keep telling me that I need to have the same fiscal department as them when they don't have the same number of schools? I'm just like, I asked for, give me the real comparison. And if you want us to be Hayward, then we have to not have 87 schools. That means larger class sizes. That actually means higher salaries for teachers and much higher salaries for custodians. So will we talk about a policy shift between now and the next, 4 weeks or so, that we're asking for some decision? 3150, you guys are the policy experts here and around budget and stuff. When I was looking at it, I don't think there's any administrative reg connected to it, and it's super vague. As much money should go to school sites. There's not, I think we've played with percentages, administration should only be 12%, therefore you could get, 70 to 80% down to school sites. We have an acting CFO, interim CFO that is saying that is not necessarily the best way to manage. And yet we are not having a policy discussion about that.
So I'm not necessarily hearing a
There is,
question.
absolutely. I mean, the question is, why do we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting some different kind of results?
Okay. Thank you. There goes my name tag. So I will go next, and there's another topic that I'll come back to. I'm still kind of struggling with the interplay between reducing clerical support and reducing the number of administrators at school sites. Because I hear that some of the clerical duties will go away if we are successful in implementing this centralized purchasing program and other central supports. But, I think there's still going to be administrative work, and then that, at least what I'm hearing from my principals, will end up getting picked up by the principal and the assistant principals if it's a high school or a school that's large enough. And so, and then we're also reducing the number of assistant principals. So it just feels like I'm not sure how that administrative burden is going to be carried. And I'm also curious about the comparison districts that were provided in the materials. It's not clear to me that either West Contra Costa or I think Fremont was the other one that was provided are running wall-to-wall pathway programs in the high schools, because at least the way Oakland Tech, which is the high school that I represent, operates, the assistant principals are actually the head of the pathway programs. And so removing an assistant principal basically means that someone else now has to be the head for 2 pathway programs or somehow do more, and yet they have less administrative support to help them. So that's where I'm really struggling. And so I guess my question is, can you talk about that tension and how the work stays manageable for someone when they're asking to do more with less? And also whether these are the right comparison districts, whether they're running wall-to-wall pathways in the high schools.
Sure, so let me do some initial thoughts here. So one, with the clerical and the AP piece, I think we're about ready to offer something for you to contemplate. And so I'd like to be able to do that once we can actually show you sort of site by site what those impacts are. 2, I just want to note, what we call clerical is classified support at a school site. And so it's broader than that concept of a clerical position. And then 3, on the school sites, I don't know specifically the answer to your question, and it may be that someone else in SLT does, but I will note we did our very best once the request was made to go out there and start seeking information from some districts to get some comps on. Some were responsive, some were a little slow to respond. So as we continue to compile information, we'll add that question to the list to ensure that we can able to answer that. But we're anticipating to be able to show you more in terms of comps. It just takes a minute for folks to be responsive.
Right. So I guess my request there would be that if you can, you find other districts in California that are running wall-to-wall pathway programs. And I will say that at Oakland Tech, not every kid right now is in a pathway. So the principal ends up being the lead administrator for the students who aren't in any pathway. So she's doing that on top of everything else. So I just think, if we're going to have fidelity to measure in and the pathway build out, which I do think is showing good results for us, although I'll let the students correct me, then I think that would be an investment I would really want to continue in a meaningful way, but we'll come to that later in the evening. We'll go next to Director Harris.
Are we still at one question? Is that the
We're still asking one question, if you can keep it to one.
Yeah, well, this is for expansion later. It's still unclear to me how the reduction in academics is going to impact school sites. So I see it here. Discipline and attendance continue to stand out. how are we going to understand how schools can operate with these cuts? And then, like a more specific question I have, I don't understand the way the AP allocations work. So if a middle school has 800 students, how do they get an AP? They get one AP. And
I'll answer the first question around the academic program.
uh-huh.
So what we tried to make sure was in place is that the school level supports, which are performed by different titles in our central office. So you have coordinators for language arts, coordinators for STEM. You have the Alma office has specialists, and we protected those types of positions that serve schools directly. But the upper layer of management is what was impacted. So what I've kind of explained it, and we've been thinking through, is that we have guidance out to school sites, and also the responsibility for central office is not only the guidance, but the compliance reporting to state. So that level of work is what will be impacted in terms of people that may not have been doing some of the compliance work will have to now report out on compliance, where we had different people to help out with that type of reporting. So what we tried to do and what we were able to do in the proposal that you see so far is that we're protecting the school level supports while decreasing the amount of management. So our executive directors will have one other person to help them with the guidance and compliance that we are responsible as a district to provide school sites. But the school level people are the positions that we protected so that they would still get the support to help with their professional development at the school sites. And we do have a tiering system for that because it's not possible for one coordinator to serve 17 schools. There's a light touch across through professional development, but actual more one-to-one, we have like a tiering system of schools that are further away from success are getting more support from the coordinators and the specialists.
Okay. Yeah, it would be good to see how that's going to work.
Okay.
It's just not, it's not coming clear to me. Like in terms of professional development, how will then the school, how will the feedback loop be closed, right? So if the school is now more responsible for this, what will be the quality assurance that they're actually getting progress on this? Will it fall on the principal? Will it fall on the AP? So as we kind of deconstruct the admin and the clerical, how then are we checking to make sure that the very things that central office was doing are being done and done well by school sites? So who's overseeing that process?
We are not shifting what is the central office responsibility of guidance and compliance reporting to school sites. That is not what is happening.
Okay.
The level of support that school sites experience now should be the same into next year, but we do look at data. So like if a school goes up, it's possible that we shift another school into getting more support. But the school level support is not impacted because we maintained those positions that are aligned to each of the networks. And so the network team is comprised of our network soup, the network partner, and then they access the academic supports to help with their school site. So that's not changing, but it is the director level of positions that is changing. And the layer right below that is sometimes they're coordinators. There's different structures depending on each department.
Okay.
But it's that upper layer and like below the executive director that is changing and that is being reduced.
Okay. It would definitely be helpful to see
Okay.
how that works. And then did you have a quick, a middle school with, like Elmhurst, for example, how would their AP and clerical assignments change? And then for our smaller schools, like that were mentioned earlier, school with less than 200 students, obviously, it doesn't sound like they would have an AP, but how would they be impacted in terms of clerical staff?
So I'm going to take the first part of the question.
I was only allowed to ask one, so I asked.
So I think that was is it a middle school you asked? Was it a middle school or a K-8 school? Middle school. So middle school with 800 kids would have a principal plus 3 assistant principals.
So they would under this new model?
Under the current model, that's what they get. Yeah, yeah. Under the current model, that's what they get. And I want to highlight one of the items that's in your packet. I believe it starts on page 19. We sort of started to compile the comps information. So it shows the staffing allocations for principals and assistant principals to give you a sense of what they look like. The second part of your question is sort of like, what is that impact going to look like? So that one is my same answer from before is we're about there where we have that allocation and what it's going to look like. So you can see what it's going to look like in terms of a reduction and then how much gets shifted into supplemental and concentration. So we're almost there to have something to share. We just need another minute to be able to give you where our best thinking is at this point.
Chance have that for the February 18th Budget and Finance Committee meeting?
February 18th, that would be...
Next week?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
by then. Yeah, I mean, like, we just need another
So
day
you're
or so,
finishing
yeah.
up on.
Mhm.
So
We're almost there.
So being able to understand that would be helpful. So
Yeah.
I think that's all I can ask at this
Yeah,
time.
we absolutely understand it. It's critical, and we've been working really hard at it. Diana Sherman has been a lead on it, and she's amazing.
Okay, so we have I want to spend about 10 more minutes on this, and we haven't heard yet from our student directors, and there may be additional questions. So let's go.
Yeah, hold on, President Linden, I thought we were doing multiple rounds of
Well,
questions.
we will. I was hoping we could spend an hour on this, but if we need to spend more, we will. But it's now the turn of Director Garibo, and then we'll go to Director Smith-Dahl.
So in academics part 2, I'm seeing reduced management of restorative justice and reduced management of family supports. And my question is, like, how is this going to impact RJ and foster youth? Because, like, we've seen how important it is to students in the past. Students have done a lot of work to fight for RJ, which is why I don't understand why it's even on here, like why we're so adamant to like cut it out of our district if we've seen like the work that it has done to our students. And yeah, I think that's all.
I'll start, and then our Chief Academic Officer can come and assist. So those are positions that are actually on the management side. And so their thinking there is we would be reducing some of the management positions, and those are restricted dollars. And so the idea is those savings that we would have from eliminating the management positions, we would take those savings and then we would redirect them to the school sites to be able to support the restorative justice facilitator positions at the school sites. How we're going to do that, we haven't exactly figured out, but that's our thinking at this point.
Ms. Casares, it might help to clarify, are these positions people who are working directly with students?
Oh, I believe not. No, they're not.
She's saying that the people in the office, the overseas.
Did you want to add to that,
Sure.
Ms. Aguilera?
So management would be positions that aren't necessarily working directly with the RJ facilitator at the school site, or sorry, the students, but they're working with the RJ facilitator. So it's a way to supervise the RJ facilitators at the school sites. That's the management piece of it that's being eliminated. It's not the facilitators. School sites, they do choose into spending their funds on RJ facilitators. And for school sites that are choosing in, plus we're trying to give them some support. And those management positions that we're reducing will result in it could be about $200,000. We are going to direct that to school sites to help reduce the cost that they will be paying for the RJ facilitator. So we're taking from an oversight positions and directing that to the school site to help out with the cost of a RJ facilitator that works with students.
Director Smithall?
So I wanted to ask about the reduced teacher support, less coaches, reduced individualized education plan support while teachers are on leave, and reduced clerical position impacting operations. What was it? This right here, prioritization and grounded in LCAP goals. It says teacher retention is really important, and so I feel like if it is what I understand it to be, coaches are like the support systems for teachers and helping them become better teachers. I'm just not understanding how reducing them will help a teacher become a better teacher and making them, perfect their skill and their craft. So I would like to know more about that.
Hi, I'm going to make sure I heard your question. Are you asking about the peer teacher coach reductions? Okay. So, it's difficult to make decisions around these. We currently have 4 consulting teachers who work with our teachers in PAR, and they do a wonderful job. So they do, but we just only have 3 teachers that are in PAR this year. PAR, peer assistance review. So it's support for teachers where their evaluation indicates that they need to have further support by other mentor teachers. Okay. And so we have currently 4 teachers, but we just have 3. We have 4 coaches and 3 teachers this year. And next year it looks like we'd have about 3 to 4. So we are going to reduce down there, but that doesn't mean we won't have enough support for teachers. We still have our new teacher support department, and the PAR team has been broadening their support. So I don't want to discount that, because we also have teachers who volunteer to be part of PAR. So it's more than who were entered in. So I believe that there's about 15 or so teachers that volunteer, but we do have some ideas and other supports that we can help manage that.
Could I interject in regard to the fact that last year when we had a presentation about PAR, I think we get something every year about how many teachers were sent and so on and so forth. I remember OEA was here, and then I met with OEA, the people who are asking for us to increase opportunities for teachers to self-select that they want more assistance because they're new or they're at a new school or a different grade. And so I feel like in the process of dealing with this budget and this item, it's another opportunity to, again, hear from OEA about how they wanted to make the change, but maybe financially there's not an impact, and yet we have a huge turnover of teachers, and so usually they end up at schools in the flats, and then those students who are English learners or newcomers need more qualified teachers, but they don't get them. So I just felt like that was a move in the right direction, and then nothing really took off. So I just wonder if this could be a conversation once again around PAR for OEA to lend their support and input on this tough topic that could really help students in their performance as well. So I don't think we should have lost sight of that.
Yep. We can certainly bring them into that conversation. But we do also pay, and what we're trying to do a little bit more of is pay our current teachers stipends, and some of them want to do that to support. So then we're not paying for the FTE, but we are figuring a way of which we can still support teachers differently.
Director Smithall, did you have more on this topic?
No, I just wanted to offer if maybe we could present a topic as like just a whole, and then we just ask our questions about that topic. I think it's kind of.
This is too scattered for you.
I think it's really scattered and
okay.
Yeah.
So that is another way to divvy it up. How many, let me just do a poll. Board members, how many of you have additional questions? Several of you. How many of you, trying to respond in the moment to your request, Director Smith-Dahl, how many of you have questions about teachers? I'm not even sure how to categorize all these. So I hear what you're saying. She's saying
She can say what she, could you explain what you
Basically, I
need?
basically what I need is I feel like just over all these, like, maybe not even topics, but over the pages, we could just be like, okay, academics part 1. Do you have questions about this? Well, do you have questions about academics part 2? No, exactly. Like, just.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm stymied because I was organized to think about this a different way.
President London, what if I share one question and then other people who have questions around that can chime in?
That would be great.
Okay. So I have a question about, this is from Ms. Casares, I think. I want to understand why we can't account for potential savings or potential revenue enhancements in any case, because I understand in the past there have been times when we said, well, we were going to do this and it didn't happen. But there have also been times, for example, with Facilitron, where we said we were going to implement a new space rental system, and actually it was very effective, and we've generated over $1 million from that, I believe. So I understand the hesitation, but I also believe that there are some things that are low-hanging fruit. I know in the past when we coordinated bell schedules with Skyline and Joaquin Miller and whoever else is up there, that it actually saved over $1 million on transportation costs. And so there are some things to me that are just like, I believe they're not unrealistic. And I don't understand why we can't account for those as a way of potentially reducing some of the layoffs. And so here's some examples for me. Coordinating bell schedules, planned savings due to a reduction in energy consumption. I believe staff are already working on that. And then there are sites that are going to be vacant next year: Oakland Soul site, Kaiser site, Santa Fe site. The power is going to be off. We should be able to account for what that might save. And then where there are duplicative staff whose positions are reduced because of the mergers of schools. So for example, in my district, Futures and Qs are going to be one school as of August. So how are we accounting for, same thing with Frick and Soul. And so in those cases, and Kaiser Sankofa, where are we seeing the savings from the closed site and the positions that will be eliminated? For example, if there used to be 2 school secretaries and now there's 1, or there used to be 2 principals and now there's 1, where is that showing up?
So it is not showing up as a first interim. So that was a question or comment actually raised not that long ago. And so I'm now working with Yvette on solidifying those. But to give you one example of where it has been accounted for, and you asked about it previously, you noted you were concerned about the reduction in custodial staffing. That reduction in custodial staffing is because we're having, it's impacting it's from the school closures that are happening.
Okay, so in that one position, it is reflected here, but there are other positions that are not reflected yet.
Right.
Okay.
And so I'll be working with Yvette to solidify what those are and what the total impacts would be.
So Director Hinton-Hodge, you have a question related to this.
I guess I have a question, yes, and feedback for that. So what I had asked for was actually, again, because I'm committed to not doing reductions, and because I feel like I've talked about generating revenue. So everything from, Second Avenue to housing to all these kind of conversations to right-sizing the district with reports that have shown us that, like, if we close schools, it could look very different. So not happening. So what I had asked for was a side-by-side. Like, for all your reductions, I want to see where you actually have a place where you can actually make some money. So, where are these? Renting an empty site. Yeah, renting an empty site. Is there merger? We have from my understanding, we're delaying ABIA doing a Prop 51, like, which, I don't know if it's direct dollars, but it's like, you know, the opportunity is that they could pay 2 years' worth of rent up front. West Oakland Middle School, we allowed like a 6th grade classroom to go on the side of the building of the new Envision Middle School, as opposed to keeping them on the side where there's only 180 students, and allowing Envision to really kind of grow out. So again, and they're gonna, if they're not happy, they're going to go like purchase another piece of property, right? So, you know, these are like, there's 606 that should be driving some better relationships. And if you don't like them and you want to stick it to them, then we could actually probably make some money. So these are, so I'm just trying to piggyback around.
Yeah.
There are like, I don't even know what y'all know. We just decided on well, we haven't voted on surplus. I'm like, let's vote on surplus. I want an estimation of how long it takes me us to put Shands on the market.
Yeah.
I want to know how long it takes us to do the CDCs and put them on the market. And I believe that if we acted efficiently and we were as invested in generating revenue as we are as cuts and staying away from the hard stuff, if we put that same amount of energy, I believe that by May, we could have a much clearer picture of maybe, again, not $6 million cuts, maybe it's, you know, $2 million at school sites. I don't know. I think that there could be a real reduction in that,
So Ms. Casares, just on that, what would need to be true for you to feel like we could actually book some of these ideas around further bell schedule coordination, planned savings due to reduction in energy consumption, you know, potentially leases, so what would need to be true for us to be able to book some of that stuff so that we wouldn't have to make the same level of layoffs?
Right, so for me, it's a measure of feasibility. And there's a risk in taking that approach. There's egregious risk, and then there's responsible risk. And so what you're asking for is what would put us in a package of responsible risk.
So we know we have we've coordinated bell schedules before successfully. That doesn't seem like an egregious risk to me.
It could be a responsible risk, and you can ask staff to have that prepared and ready for the next board meeting, have it ready for those next round of 2x2s, so that we can see this is what we would be implementing, this is how it would be implemented, and so that everyone has clarity that it's not speculative, it's not hypothetical, and it will be implemented.
Okay, are there other questions related to revenue generation? The topic right now is revenue generation or savings. Director Yee, then Director Ng.
So there's two things. One,
And Director Yee, I'm going to give each person 2 minutes.
the cliff is in the third year out. I mean, we are actually, yes, I'm sorry. I'm quite aware in the discussions with the public and so forth that they see this big amount and they don't realize that the projection is going to hit us in the fiscal year 20.
Well, just to be clear, Director
2022.
Yee, I don't think we make 3% next year.
Excuse me, let's let Director Yee have his time.
Okay.
Everyone's only getting 2 minutes.
So,
I'm on
yeah,
the clock
so,
now.
So, you know, one of the things that many of us politically find unsavory is monetizing Kaiser, let's say. You know, because, you know, it's obvious that it could be a charter site, it could be a private school site. I mean, there's all kinds of potential there that could be stretched out that we wouldn't be able to solve, we wouldn't be able to book this year, but we could theoretically book in 2 years or 3 years down the line. So I think those kinds of things are important for us when I'm looking at the negative balances. You know, we're okay I'm not saying okay, but we are more or less there. So that's one thing that I'm trying to encourage on the revenue side, being realistic, but at the same time laying it all out there. People don't want, you know, you could see the demonstrations, no cuts, no school closures, and by the way, we're going to be we're gonna be in contract negotiations again. We're gonna have to say, yes, there are cuts, yes, there are closures. So that's one thing. The second is, and this one is I'm looking at the what is the amount? This 15.5 million and 6.2 million, those are the cuts. So if I look at the 6.2 million site cuts, I'm looking at around 75 positions. I mean, that's the way I conceptualize it. And so the question I have for the schools is, could they absorb 75 position cuts, knowing that there's Measure N money, which I'm very protective of, but I just happen to see Life Academy spent $26,000 on a trip to Puerto Rico with Measure N money. So if I'm going to that principal and I say, you could either have a quarter of an assistant principal or you can send 26 kids to Puerto Rico, that's the flexibility we need to communicate to the high schools about their Measure N money. Because it's not sacrosanct in crises like this. So that slot, that Measure N slot is a substantial amount of money that I would suggest putting in that site-by-site schedule, so everybody knows how much money the high schools have. And we move to a place where we discuss, maybe it's a supplanting, but if you gave a principal and a community the choice of 4 trips to Puerto Rico or an assistant principal, I don't think there'd be any question which one they would choose. And that's the kind of discretion a school needs to have.
Let's go, okay, do you want to answer that? Is there, do you,
And Mr.
Director Yee, you're over your time, so I'm not sure if you wanted to respond, Ms. Cazares.
I'm not sure there was a question
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Director Ng.
That is a question.
What? Director Yee, please be on the microphone and please state it as a question. I'm going to ask everyone to please do that.
Is this Jeopardy?
It is, yes.
Yeah. Can the schools, can you imagine, can the staff imagine 72, 75 positions gone in the schools and maintaining a base program based upon that much cut? And we have to have confidence that you could make that level of cuts. I'm just looking at 6.2
$3 million of that is for people allocation.
because 80% of the money is personnel. So I'm just using that as a stat.
I do think that we have to be realistic that if we are making reductions to people, that some work streams would not continue, or we would have to better focus in on what's the highest priority. It's hard to answer your question without looking at school by school and specifics. I do think that our SSCs and principals will be looking at their funds differently given the reduction. So they may be, as you mentioned, using funds differently. We will not be supplanting, but we will be thinking of how to use funds differently and probably making hard choices. Well, definitely making hard choices, just as the rest of our district is having to do. So I know that's not a direct answer of like, yes, firmly, we can say that the same work will continue. I do think
basically saying,
prior.
do we have enough slack in our system
So I
that we
think,
could eliminate
I think
75?
this is a good topic for you to discuss with the staff in between this meeting and the next. Director Ng, we're going to go to you now. You indicated you had a question on this revenue issue.
I have a couple questions that are related to revenue generation.
Yes.
One question is, my understanding is that, I guess this would be for Dr. Aguilera, is that my understanding is that the ESSA dollars are, I'm trying to remember what they were from last year, have been published again for this year. I'm not particularly getting this right. But
So the
that there
CSI
might-
dollars
that
and the
set-aside
LPS.
dollars, yeah, that there might be additional funds available for school sites that could potentially
Those are federal funds?
offset. I'll let Dr. Aguilera explain it, but let me just set up the question. So I'm wondering if we would be able to add that to the school level analysis to see if that would be able to buffer some of the reductions.
So where we do have the firm announced allocation for our school district. We will be allocating that out to school sites on their one-pagers. For something like Title I, we actually know overall there's supposed to be an increase, but we don't have specifics for our district yet. So we're maintaining at flat, and we'll readjust once we get those firmed up numbers. So it is possible that the funding that they received in prior year will be similar to what they will receive going forward. So Title I we're projecting as being flat. We do have numbers for CSI, Title IV, and low performing student block grant. So all of those should be posted on their one-pagers coming up.
Okay, could we add that to the school level analysis? Because I know last year we had the CSI and the,
We
had
can.
some of those.
At the time of publication for our submission, we did not have that information, and we have gotten new information, and our state contacts have been helping us work through the specific details on the allocations going forward. So we will be able to add that information.
Yeah, both the CSI and the other.
LPS, low performing student block
that
grant.
would be great.
It's continuous school improvement dollars. It's for low performing schools. They're provided some additional supports from the state. Yes.
Are there other questions for staff about revenue enhancement?
So my other question was about ensuring that we're, I know that in the past, the free and reduced lunch percentage in the district has been decreasing, and better understand, I don't know who the best person to answer this would be. I know we are experiencing a demographic shifts, but also that there might be other reasons why families are not enrolling in free and reduced lunch. So is there any thought around strategic outreach that we can ensure that we're maximizing our free and reduced lunch counties?
That's a great question. One of the things that there's a couple different elements to answer your question about free and reduced lunch. It is a revenue stream for the district, right? And so there are multiple different entry points. So definitely getting families to apply and qualify for the National School Free Lunch Program is a way to increase our revenue. But probably the bigger area, and with the central kitchen coming online and kind of really putting some focus in the nutritional services, and I would just say Irene Reynolds is here tonight, the Executive Director of Nutritional Services. Really the opportunity for this district is around increasing participation rates of our students. Many kids qualify for for the free lunch program, but they don't actually access the food. And so we're doing a lot of planning right now, and we would like to bring that to the board at some point where we're at around the planning for really a complete revise of the way that we're doing lunch in Oakland, lunch and breakfast programming. And so the biggest opportunity for us is to really look at the participation rates of students, because that is where the revenue is. And it's significantly more than even like a marginal increase in the number of kids participating in the program. But we're absolutely looking at both.
Thank you. Other questions from directors or
Would any of
around
that
revenue
impact
enhancement?
next year? Is that a long-term plan, or would any of that potentially impact or be cost savings for next year that we could?
It is short and long term. I mean, we're not waiting, we're starting now. So, I mean, we're implementing exactly with breakfast after the bell, supper programs, expanding some of those different, those different strategies across the system now. Those are going into place as we speak. Then next year with the launch of the central kitchen, we'll go even deeper. And then probably, I would say over the next 3 years, as we roll out, more improvements across the system, we're looking to get increases at each phase. And so, hopefully by the end of this year, we'll even have an increase in participation rates. And this is one of the things, like we're very clear as to where we have low participation rates, and we are low relative to other districts. So there's a tremendous upside there, right? And so we're hoping to recapture some of that toward the back end of this year, and then really launch with a robust effort in the upcoming year, and then really picking the low-hanging fruit in that schools with low participation, high percentage of students that qualify for free and reduced lunch, and really working on both the breakfast program and the lunch program and the supper program.
Okay. Other questions about about revenue enhancement?
So money in terms of,
Director Yee, is this something we need to answer now? So can you please be on the microphone?
What are you estimating? What is your revenue goal?
right. So what in terms of, and a lot of this is moving because we're launching new things in different places and learning from them, right? As we bring schools online, we're piloting things to understand and learn from what is the best practice to implement. So just the consultant that's working with us, who is really top notch across the country around, nutritional services, is projecting a 5% increase in overall revenue. If we go beyond that, at a 19% increase in reimbursement rates from the federal government, I don't know if I get this wrong, you can jump up and correct me. Is about a 19% increase in revenue, which that would be about $1.5 million. So, but that requires a lot of collaboration across the entire district, right? Like, you need to get buy-in from schools, you need to get buy-in from, when you were talking about lunch, the bell schedules, some of the districts are moving to lunch and recess and separating them so that kids actually have time to eat. So there's a lot of system change involved with that. And we do have some of the top people in the field that are working on it. And Irene and her team have been doing an amazing job at that.
Okay, folks, I just want to let you know, it is 10 to 10. After this, we have several additional items on the agenda, including the consent agenda. So please think about whether this is a question you need to ask tonight or whether it's a question you can email in and get a response. Director Hinton Hodge.
So it's a bit of a process. It is a process question in part, so that I don't have to we don't have to keep going. But I just kind of want to know that, like, I think we've had some ideas. And so I guess I don't know if I need a little bit more staff response to, I see Mr. Tadashi here. Like, can we move Prop 51? Ms. Renteria is here. What gets in the way? And I think those are my questions. You know what I mean? So, to you, Madam President, I can clearly put all these things in writing, but I'm just trying to, what is the staff's real capacity or conviction to actually kind of help push us in these particular, answer some of these questions. Maybe our ideas are really horrible. She was saying, oh, it could be so risk adverse. I don't know. I feel like we've been holding out on some charters to, do some upfront rental to us. And is it because we ideologically don't like charters that we just kind of screw them around and don't do the business? It's that kind of stuff that I don't know if there's a bias that exists that we're not confronting. So, what is it that gets in the way? Please, somebody.
Is that a question?
It's a real question. Okay. What gets in the way? We asked for an ABI at least 2 years ago. We couldn't get it. There's resources out there. What gets in the way?
Okay, President Lynn, I'm not saying a response to that. I do have some other questions.
Right, so we're gonna see if there's a response from the superintendent, and then we're gonna move on. And here comes Mr. Nakatagawa. So you all decide who's gonna respond.
Good evening, Tadashi Nakatagawa, Acting Deputy Chief for Facilities. I'm a little confused with the question because Prop 51 is a capital program. It has nothing to do with operational funding.
So
if there's some nexus
here's where
there.
Here's where it might, to me, and again, I have crazy logic here. They're doing a Prop 39. I don't have a problem with Prop 39. Some staff have a real big problem with Prop 39. I think it's cool because you can actually get some rent. But Prop 51 was an opportunity for you to build your own school 2 years ago. And there was, we haggled them around, you have to pay rent on the property that's not even built. That's rent you were supposed to be collecting. So why, you see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? There are actually opportunities. Maybe you weren't involved in that. I don't know.
I wasn't. I wasn't aware that
So anyway,
we had an ability
here's
to
the whole
charge
thing.
rent on
There's
Prop
probably
51
someone,
development.
if they took the time, could actually look at how could you, You don't have to screw every charter, but could you figure out a way to generate resources and money? And I don't think anyone's willing to do it. Either you don't like them, you know what I mean? Like, so it is not a rhetorical question. It's just it's a tired question for me. But we can move on.
Well, I'd just like to offer a brief response. Thank you, Tadashi. Is, again, back to the purpose of tonight is a discussion to get feedback and guidance. I started this conversation around let's step more into creative problem solving. There would be nothing to stop the board to provide staff guidance or a directive in terms of investigating certain proposals related to properties that we are going to have vacant, as an example, to consider some other revenue generation ideas that perhaps we haven't done in the past. But that would need to be guidance if that's a direction that the board would like to explore.
Madam Superintendent, I understand what you're saying, and we can guide all day long, but see, the problem is that there's 7 of us, and so I get concerned about you getting 7 little mini superintendents telling you what to do, right? And I'm the classic person who gets out of her lane and has all kinds of crazy ideas of what you should do or what other people should do. I mean, you gave me a reduction list, so why can't you give me a revenue generating list? That's all I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to get onto the other side of the ledger. You all are the brilliant, don't you want to save a restorative justice manager?
I'm more than happy to do that, and your point is well taken. However, we have reduction proposal because of board guidance and directive. And we can have a list of ideas that we bring, but at the end of the day, it's going to have to be the board to actually vote to decide. And so to the degree that there's some collective energy around, I'm going to put it out there, are we interested in selling a piece of property? That's some clear guidance that we have not, back to courage and back to putting some things out there that would probably get more folks coming out to the board. Those are the kinds of explore these, and I'm not suggesting that may not be what folks want to do. But we're not going to eliminate the structural deficit through Facilitron. We're not going to eliminate the structural deficit through foundation fundraising. I mean, those are Band-Aids that we've done and we can continue to do. But those are some of the directions that I know we have an asset management study session coming up to lift up some of those exploration ideas that the board would be interested in.
So going back to the format for this evening,
One second.
please,
I think we're
but
gonna
no,
need
wait,
to-
no, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying we're going to need to vote to extend the meeting soon.
We will vote to extend the meeting, and it's probably going to be till 1 a.m. I'm going to be really honest, given the pace this is going. So drink your coffee, go get your soda. And I'm sorry if I sound cranky, but it's a long day for everybody. So the structure here is we're asking questions. We've been asking questions now for an hour and a half. I'd like us to speed it up. I'd like to give us about 20 more minutes on questions, and then we go into what Director Hinton Hodge has been asking us for, which is, what are your ideas, right? And that we were going to structure it around what can you live with, what are the reductions you can live with, and then if there's something you can't live with, what are you going to propose? How are we going to make it even? Okay, so can we move forward with that? Do I have a motion to extend the meeting to 1 a.m.?
Move it. Yes, move extension.
I will second. Till tomorrow. Till tomorrow. Okay, Director Gonzalez, please take us to another topic.
Well, Director Harris, did you have a question about cost savings or revenue enhancement before we move on? Okay. So these are 2 questions about.
Madam President, I didn't hear a yay or nay.
No, you heard no.
Can you, all those in favor of extending the meeting, please raise your hand.
We got 4. Did we get 4?
No, it's 3.
It's 3. That motion failed.
All right, y'all, we can abandon this. I mean, this is really serious. I get it that, y'all, everyone's tired and you don't want to extend the meeting, but then stop talking.
Motion to move it to midnight.
Second.
See?
How many people would like to extend the meeting to midnight?
Yes. Okay.
I think we need to go till 1 a.m.
Well, we
Fine,
can
we'll go to
always-
midnight, and then if we need to extend it again, we
Yes.
will.
Okay, so here's two questions about the proposed reductions in Central. One question, and I think this is for Dr. Aguilera, if she's still here. I don't see her. I don't know, maybe someone else can, oh, okay. So this question about reducing textbook, funds for textbook adoptions and professional development. I'm really, it was a disaster when we didn't have funds set aside for textbook adoption. And I remember 2 years in a row where you guys came to us in June and said, oh, we really need textbooks. And then there was no funds available and it caused a lot of stress. So I want to understand how, and I know we still have high school tech curriculum that we haven't replaced yet. And so how are we going to do textbook adoption if we are basically rating that fund? And then my other question is about attendance timekeeping if we reduce clerical at sites, because in the past we've had like $6 million audit findings and we had to pay back $6 million on attendance timekeeping. And so how are we going to make sure that that doesn't happen again if we're reducing clericals at sites?
So attendance specialists are not an item that is being reduced. It is the, once school sites hit a certain number, there's the other category, and that we always have protected attendance specialists. So it's the base program is a principal, administrative assistant, and then attendance taking for that reason that you just described. So it's possible that a school might purchase more attendance taking ability, but the base program that we're saying is what you need to do those basic functions is protected. That's part of the base.
Okay, and then the other position was about textbook adoptions.
So the textbook adoptions, what we are still protecting that fund, but not as much is potentially needed. We also have had a shift in the lottery funds because that revenue has increased. I probably need to defer to Luce on why it has increased, but what I understand is that our projecting of that amount was less than what it should have been. And now that we have adjusted, it was a pretty big increase, about, I think, $700,000. So you can imagine that if we're increasing that by $700,000, we're able to decrease then
so just to clarify,
adoptions.
the plan that Mr. Jacques presented to us last spring about the upcoming textbook adoption, specifically for high school, I think that was the piece.
It's still going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Director Smith-Dahl, and then Director Garibo. And then I'm going to just tell you that we are only going to do this for 15 more minutes, and then we will ask you to submit your questions in writing. I want to make it really clear, folks. This is the last time, tonight and tomorrow, when you submit your written questions, to submit questions. On the 26th, what staff is going to be bringing us is what we direct, what we're going to talk about in a minute. So please make sure you get everything out there tonight and tomorrow in writing. Thank you. Director Smith-Dahl.
We just want to say our last few questions because we got to go.
We got homework. So
I got college jobs, y'all. So I wanted to go first.
So since we brought up the discussion about undocumented students and our newcomer students, I do want to acknowledge that there is a lot of newcomer students that are coming in the upcoming years. There will be a huge increase of newcomer students, and the numbers just keep going up. So what I saw was reducement of management and reduced scope of work to English language learner and multilingual achievement. So how is that going to impact our newcomer students? And is it going to take away the help that they need? Or, yeah.
So we have a couple of different supports that are helping our newcomer students. We have school sites receive a projection for what we call late arriving newcomers. So it's space for when students come, they have a space to go to. And this year we have seen an increase, as you have mentioned. We're expanding a couple of programs next year for this reason. So school sites will have an allocation to serve those students, and we have that projected amount of dollars set aside for that. The other part around the wraparound services, we have a couple of different funding sources. We have CalNew, which is paying for social workers to work with newcomer students to highly impacted school sites. We also have Salesforce, is another grant that has also provided similar support. So it's social work that's going to school sites. And then for the academic piece, we have what's called a specialist that's working with specific school sites to improve their instruction through both. We have integrated, which is through the regular programming, and then designated, which is like a separate class that students are participating in for language development, for English language development. So those are the services that are being maintained. They're not experiencing a reduction in the same way other departments are.
Okay. Anything further there? All right.